and they interact with the wider community, then the parental responsibility becomes really a big issue. And fisabilillah, we have had discussion with colleagues where a lot of people think even down to where their children go to school become an issue. And a lot of you know what is going on in Birmingham now in relation to some aspects of the society, what is acceptable to the wider community and what is different for the Muslims, and how we want to preserve our identity. So before we go on to the presentation, I will do the traditional introduction with the profile of our speaker. Muhammad Nurruddeen Lemu is the Director of Research and Training at the Da'wah Institute of Nigeria, Islamic Education Trust in Mina, Nigeria. He develops, facilitates, and conducts train-the-trainers courses in enhancing interfaith dialogue and engagement, interfaith cooperation, building resilience against various forms of religious extremism among Muslims, and promoting faith-based critical thinking, Sharia intelligence. He is a director of several organizations, including Lotus Capital, which is a halal investment company, the Development Initiative of West Africa, DIWA, the Al-Majri Child Rights Initiative, ICICE Al-Nur Academy. He is a co-founder of the Interfaith Activity and Partnership for Peace and of the Regional Center of Expertise, MENA, which focuses on education for sustainable development. He holds various positions on the board of several other organizations that focus on issues related to social welfare, governance and public policy, education, environment and sustainable development, leadership, family life, youth empowerment, and gender equality. Malam Lemu has trained in giving talks to students, lecturers, youth, community and religious leaders in over 30 countries on 5 continents. He has moderated, presented, and produced more than 200 radio and television programs. He was also among those nominated by the Nigeria Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs to represent the Nigerian Muslim leadership at the last national conference. He is a fellow of Aspen Leadership Institute and member of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, Colorado, USA. He is a fellow of the King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, Vienna, Austria, and of the African Leadership Initiative, West Africa. He holds an MSc in Resource Management from Edinburgh University, UK, and first degree in Agriculture from Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. His personal motto is growth, contribution with compassion, wisdom, faith, and fun.
Assalamu alaikum. I hope this is good enough. I think better standing. So with the permission of the chairman, if you don't mind. Firstly, thank you to the organizers for this opportunity. It's a great opportunity to see people you've not seen since you were in university. And alhamdulillah, this is one of the functions, I think, of organizations that are able to bring us together from time to time as we try to contribute to society as part of our own struggle in fulfilling our purpose in this life. It's a wonderful opportunity again to meet some very close friends. Malam Bilal, we've worked on this subject for some time now, the challenge of atheism. Excuse me. Most of my time, I think for the last 10 years or so, has focused a lot on extremism. And with the rise of Boko Haram and ISIS, a lot of the attention of the Da'wah Institute where I work, and alhamdulillah where I've been blessed with a really wonderful team, I sometimes take a lot of credit for what the team does because they work in the background, unfortunately. But what I find interesting is the relationship between how extremist Muslim groups operate and how new atheism also operates. And I'll come back to that in a second. For the purpose of what are we talking about, there are three groups I'd like to say a little about briefly. And inshallah, with the comments of those who will be contributing and saying their own, I hope inshallah any gaps I leave would be patched up. The nature of this topic is it requires a couple of days. We had a workshop sometime last year in Mina, and I think first thing we did was to prepare a list of all the questions we were aware of that atheists in Nigeria were raising. And so it required going to their websites, interviews with some of them, and also to some extent looking at some of the books they were using, and the arguments that were being recycled by various atheist groups. And we came up with a list of around 60-something or so. And we decided, okay, everybody start answering each question, and then we meet and discuss our responses. And I think we were able at the end of nearly 2 days to have done up to about 35 or so of those. We've not been able to meet again to carry on, but this is work in progress because the challenge is not going away, and it won't go away on its own. When we say atheists, this is a group of people that's not new to history. They've been there before Islam. People have always challenged religion, whether organized or otherwise. But in the modern context, we're talking about people who consider religion as all man-made, all. That God is just a projection of human imagination, that we created God. And that religion is just a social institution for controlling people and putting them in a straitjacket to think in a particular way. It's really more a control mechanism. And for some, it's just the opium of the masses. It's what you give them to keep them in line, so to speak. Atheism challenged a lot to do with religion, and it continues to. Most religions that believe God exists were able to exchange arguments. Muslim arguments from the time of Ghazali, Abu Hanifa, even before, from Abu Hanifa, Ghazali, etc., have been used by Christians and by Jews in their own arguments against atheists. Why? Because the key question is, number one, does the Creator actually exist? Or did this universe come into existence by some accident? Did it bring itself into existence? Why is there something instead of nothing? Why does existence even exist? Is it possible that all these laws of nature, if you say everything started with gravity, no problem. Where and who made this law called gravity? If it didn't make itself, what's the first beginner? You know, when you say Badi'u Samawati wal Ard, as one of the names of Allah, the originator, the one that started the ball rolling. When Allah is described as the beginner, the originator of the heavens and earth, if you say it's not Allah, then who did? Because everything we see in our experience has a cause. Why, when it comes to this whole universe, would it not have a cause? So it was not a big problem for most of the major religions to agree and exchange arguments. The big problem came usually after you have agreed, okay, there's a creator. So let's say this universe didn't create itself, there's a creator. Let's talk more about the creator. And the moment you start saying the creator has chosen people, especially a particular tribe, then it's viewed as racist. When you say the creator had to become part of his creation to experience life and die on the cross or shed blood, then people are like, come on. And so the moment you start talking about the qualities or attributes of the creator, you start finding the major religions finding it more difficult to share. More difficult, not impossible. Why? Because there are some Christians, in spite of Trinity, in spite of the belief in the vicarious atonement, in spite of all of that, there are some Christians who do not believe Jesus is God. There are some who don't take it as God in that sense. And so when you read some of the writings of people like Karen Armstrong, John Esposito, and some of these others about Christianity, they really don't represent popular Christianity. So you still have some borrowing. That's one side. Because it's been quite easy for atheists to deconstruct the theology and the creed of Christians in particular, some Jews, not all, they have found it more difficult to deconstruct Islamic understanding of Tawheed. And I'll come to that because that has a lot of qualifications. New atheism is really using most of the arguments of atheists, but with a greater concentration on Islam. It's like Ansar ko Agaba, as Hausas would say. You know, Muslims are a major focus of this new brand called New Atheism. Yes, they attacked others, but unlike in the past, when most of the attacks were against Christian concept of God and Christian understanding of God, New Atheism is focusing a lot on Muslims, with Islamophobia and that sort of things. But there's another group that relates a lot with the New Atheists that's probably even more dangerous in their approach. These are ex-Muslim atheists. They were Muslims, they left Islam, and they are now atheists, and they are attacking Islam. We have a lot of them on the rise across the Muslim world. And the response from the Muslim world has been dismal and embarrassing. Some of the strongest responses are actually taking place in the West by Muslims who have grown in the West, Muslims who have studied in Western universities. And the reason why the West is so critical here is because this is the lion's den. When you live in Nigeria and you live here and there, yes, you do get Western influence. And when you say, we hear some atheist arguments, but to a very great extent, it's a minority of a minority. And if you're not on social media, you won't even know they exist. When you come to study here in the West, you have come to the lion's den. This is where the lion and the lioness, they're all here. And you're not spared. And there's no filtering. And there's no censorship. You can't tell your child, when you reach this age, we will start talking about this problem. No. You think you're the only one who loves and is interested in your child. Stop deceiving yourself. Shaitan is too. And atheists are too. Just as businesses are interested in your children. Sometimes your children are the way to get to your pocket. So there's a lot of interest in what your children believe in. And for new atheists and ex-Muslim atheists, the battle is not over until you can intellectually assimilate. Say you are an atheist, but that's not enough. You must show you are against religion, any religion, Islam in particular. Back on to what I said earlier about extremism. Now I'll start with groups like Boko Haram, in that that's a very Nigerian thing, and I think many of us are more conversant with the kind of arguments that Boko Haram is involved in. We started some years ago a survey to try and identify the arguments that Boko Haram use to recruit people. Before we went far, we realized they were recycling and using arguments by ISIS and Al-Shabaab and Jamaat al-Nusra, this group and that group, etc. So we cast the net wider to look at the other material these organizations were using. We ended with a list of 218 arguments. 218 arguments that recruiters were using to draw people into that